Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for choosing Yuki Readers. If you're ready, let's begin our journey together. The story begins with letters written by Robert Walton, a ship captain, to his sister Margaret in England. Everything the reader learns about Frankenstein comes from these letters, in which Walton shared what Victor had told him. Walton loved science and dreamed of discovering new things, so he set out on a dangerous journey to the North Pole. One day, he and his crew saw a man on the ice. He was very weak and freezing. They took him aboard the ship. The man's name was Victor Frankenstein. As Victor slowly recovered, he began to tell Walton the tragic story of his life. Chapter 1. My name is Victor Frankenstein, and I grew up in Geneva, Switzerland. For many years, my family held important positions in government. My father, in particular, was well known for his honesty and hard work. He dedicated his youth to public service, so he didn't marry until later in life. Maybe I should tell you how my father and mother met. One of his closest friends, Beaufort, was once a wealthy merchant. But after a series of misfortunes, he fell into poverty. Because of his pride, he withdrew from society and moved to Lucerne with his daughter Caroline. Over time, he became sick and frail. Caroline cared for him with the little she had. She worked to support them, but their situation grew worse every day. In the 10th month, her father died in her arms. Caroline was left both an orphan and a beggar. As she knelt beside Beaufort's coffin, crying, my father entered the room. To the poor girl, he seemed like a guardian angel. She put her trust in him. After his friend's funeral, my father brought her to Geneva and arranged for her to stay with a relative. 2 years later, Caroline became his wife. There was a large age difference between my parents, but it only brought them closer and made their bond stronger. I was raised in a home full of love and care. My mother's kindness and my father's gentle, loving looks are among my first memories. Growing up with their joy, affection, and attention gave me not only happiness, but also taught me patience, compassion, and self-discipline. My mother wanted to have a daughter, but for a long time I was their only child. One day, during a trip to Italy, my parents met a poor peasant family with a beautiful little girl living with them. Elizabeth was different. She had a special grace that made her stand out from the other children. Her hair was golden, glowing softly whenever the sunlight touched it. Her blue eyes were clear and calm, and her delicate features showed both softness and sensitivity. Even though her clothes were plain, she carried herself with elegance. When you looked at her, she didn't seem like an ordinary child, but rather a gentle spirit sent from heaven. When my parents learned that she came from a noble background but had lost her family, my mother decided to welcome her into our family. That's how Elizabeth became part of our lives. Everyone loved Elizabeth. The deep love and respect people felt for her were also a source of pride and happiness for me. The evening before she came to live with us, my mother said with a smile, "I have a beautiful gift for Victor. I will give it to him tomorrow." When she introduced Elizabeth to me the next day, I took those words seriously and saw her as truly mine, to protect, to love, and to care for. Whenever someone praised her, I felt as if they were praising something that belonged to me. We used to call each other cousins, but that word didn't truly describe what she meant to me. She was more than a sister, someone I thought would be part of my life forever. No one could have had a happier childhood than I did. My mother and father were truly kind and understanding people. As I grew up with their guidance, I never saw them as strict or controlling, but as loving and supportive. When I spent time with other families, I clearly saw how lucky I was. This made me feel deep gratitude and strengthened my love for my family. After my parents had a second son, they stopped traveling and settled in our house in Geneva. I started living a quiet and more introverted life, away from crowds. I didn't care much about most of my schoolmates, but I became very close friends with one of them, Henri Clerval. Sometimes I had a strong temper and deep emotions, but these feelings didn't lead me to childish games. Instead, they became a strong desire to learn. Still, I wasn't interested in all kinds of knowledge. I didn't care much about languages, politics, or how governments worked. I wanted to learn the secrets of the sky and the earth. Whether it was about nature's outer form, its inner spirit, or the mystery of the human soul, my curiosity was always about the deepest, most hidden truths of existence. At the same time, Clerval, you could say, was more interested in the moral side of things. Henry, Elizabeth, and I spent our childhoods together. We were like 3 parts of one person. Elizabeth was the soul, Henry was the heart, and I was the mind. Henry was always telling stories about heroes and brave adventurers. Elizabeth loved her art, and I began to study science. You have to understand, I was still very young and knew very little about real science. I read any book that promised to explain the secrets of the universe. I found several of these books in my father's library. They had been written by men who lived many centuries ago. "Ah, you're reading this," my father said. "Ah, Cornelius Agrippa. My dear Victor, do not waste your time upon this. It is sad trash." If he had explained to me that no one believed in these books anymore, things might have turned out differently. Much of what I read was closer to magic than to true science. But I didn't know that. Instead of stopping, I searched for even more books like them. After that, I started reading books by old alchemists like Agrippa, Paracelsus, and Albertus Magnus. I became very interested in their ideas, such as the elixir of life, the philosopher's stone, and summoning spirits. Over time, these dreams turned into bigger goals, like curing all human diseases and making people live forever. Looking back on it, I guess I was foolish. I tried spells to change lead into gold. I tried to make devils appear. Of course, none of these spells worked. I might have gone on this way for years, but then something happened. When I was about 15 years old, we were staying at our summer house in Bellerive. One day, we saw a terrible thunderstorm. I watched as lightning hit a big oak tree near our house and destroyed it completely. During that event, a wise man who was with us explained to me a modern theory about electricity. I was amazed. After hearing him, I felt that the old alchemist's ideas were no longer enough for me. That moment changed the way I saw the world. It was the true beginning of my path as a scientist. I began to see my old fascinations as childish, and I believed I could never truly understand the universe through them. So I turned to subjects built on stronger foundations, mathematics, natural sciences, and logic. This new path brought me peace and a strange sense of clarity. For a while, what I didn't realize was that this sign had not come from heaven. I didn't know that my pursuit of science would one day destroy my life and everything I held dear. I had opened the gates to a world I could not control, and it swallowed everything I was. Chapter 2. When I turned 17, my parents decided to send me to the University of Ingolstadt in Germany. Until then, I had studied in schools in Geneva, but my father believed that, to complete my education, I should also learn about other ways of life outside my own country. So, the date of my departure was set. But before that day came, the first tragedy of my life happened, as if it was a sign of the sorrow that would follow. Elizabeth had caught scarlet fever. Her illness was very serious, and she was in great danger. Thanks to my mother's care and attention, Elizabeth recovered, but the illness passed on to my mother. On the third day, she became sick too. Her fever came with frightening symptoms, and the doctors' faces showed that they feared the worst. Even on her deathbed, this wonderful woman stayed strong and kind. She died peacefully. Even in death, her face showed love. I don't need to describe the pain that everyone feels when they lose someone close to them. That empty space in the heart, that look of despair on the face. It takes time to accept that the person you saw every day, who felt like a part of your soul, is truly gone. The light in their eyes goes out. The voice you knew so well becomes silent forever. These are the thoughts in the first days of grief. But when time proves that the loss is real, that's when true sorrow begins. Because of what happened, my journey to Ingolstadt was delayed. I asked my father for a few more weeks before leaving. Leaving the house and returning to normal life felt disrespectful. This was my first deep sorrow, and it frightened me. I didn't want to leave my loved ones behind, especially sweet Elizabeth. I wanted to see her feel at least a little better before I left. Finally, it was time to go. My friend Henry came to see me that last day. He had tried to convince his father to let him join me at the university, but he had failed. His father was a narrow-minded businessman and thought Henry's dreams were foolish and dangerous. We stayed up late that night. I knew everything in my life was about to change. Maybe that's why Elizabeth, Henry, and I spent that final day together. We had never been so close, and never loved each other so deeply. I didn't know we would never feel that same happiness again. The next morning, I left for university. When I arrived, I was taken to a room where I would stay alone. The next morning, I gave my documents to the school and visited some important professors. By chance, or maybe by the hand of fate, I first met Professor M. Krempe, who taught natural philosophy. Monsieur Krempe was a short man with a harsh voice and an unfriendly face. He was rude, but he knew his science well. He asked me about my knowledge in different areas of science. I answered carelessly and even a little proudly. I told him that I had studied old alchemists. The professor looked at me in surprise. "Did you really read such nonsense?" he said. I said yes. "Every minute you spent on those books was a complete waste of time," he said loudly. "Your mind is full of useless names and broken systems. My God, where did you grow up that no one told you these ideas are 1,000 years old and completely worthless?" I didn't expect to find a student of Albertus Magnus and Paracelsus in this modern age. Young man, you must start your studies all over again. Then he gave me a list of books on natural philosophy and said he would begin his lectures next week. On the other days, a chemistry professor named M. Waldman would give lectures. I was not disappointed when I returned to my room. As I said before, I already thought those old writers were useless. In my first days in the city, I spent time getting to know the people and places around me. Later, I remembered Krempe's class schedule. I didn't want to hear his lectures because I found him arrogant and small-minded. But I also remembered Professor Waldman, whom I had not yet met, as he had been away from town. Out of curiosity, and maybe a bit of boredom, I went into the classroom. Soon, Monsieur Waldman entered. He was nothing like Krempe. He looked about 50, and his face was full of kindness. His temples were gray, but the back of his head still had black hair. He was short but stood straight, and his voice was the sweetest I had ever heard. He started his lecture by talking about the history of chemistry and the great scientists who helped improve it. He spoke their names with great passion. Then he gave a general overview of the subject, explained some basic terms, and did a few simple experiments. At the end, he praised modern chemistry with words I will never forget. The old teachers promised impossible things but did nothing. Today's scientists promise little, but they perform miracles. They explore nature's secrets and show how things work deep inside. They reach the skies. They've discovered how blood moves and what the air is made of. They have gained great powers. They can control lightning, copy earthquakes, and even trick the invisible world with shadows of its own. Those were not just the words of a professor. They felt like words from destiny itself. As I listened, something inside me awoke. If so much has already been done, I thought, then I will do even more. I will follow those who came before me, but I will also find my own way, discover unknown powers, and reveal the deepest secrets of creation. I could not sleep that night. My heart was in chaos. I felt that something new was about to begin inside me, but I didn't yet have the power to control it. The next morning, I went to see Professor Waldman. I told him the same things I had told Krempe, but Waldman didn't laugh at the books I had read. He said, "We owe a lot to those old writers." Yes, they were wrong, but they were the beginning. Without them, we wouldn't have the science we have today. Waldman said he was glad that I wanted to study chemistry. "But," he added, "you should study all sciences, not just chemistry. Studying only one science is like looking at just one side of a building. You only know that one side." That day ended, but it was a day I would always remember. It was the day that shaped my future. Chapter 3. From that day on, I focused almost only on natural philosophy, especially chemistry, in the widest meaning of the word. I read many books about these subjects with great interest. These books were written by modern scientists and were full of smart ideas and deep thoughts. I went to lectures and met the science teachers at the university. Even M. Krempe, who looked unfriendly and had bad manners, gave useful and true information. So, I still thought he was valuable. I became close to Monsieur Waldman. He was a kind person. He never spoke in a proud or strict way. His lessons were easy to understand, friendly, and did not feel like he was trying to show off. 2 years passed in this way. During this time, I did not visit Geneva. I was fully focused on making new discoveries. Only people who have experienced this can understand how exciting science is. In other subjects, you can only go as far as others before you, and there is nothing new to learn. But in science, there is always something new to discover and explore. I made progress quickly, and after 2 years, I discovered ways to improve chemical instruments. Because of this, I received a lot of respect and admiration at the university, but living there didn't help me improve anymore. So, I planned to return to my friends and my hometown. Then something happened that made me stay longer. I became very interested in the structure of the human body and also in the body of any living animal. I often asked myself, where did life really come from? It was not an easy question. People have always thought it was a mystery, but I believed we could discover many important things if fear or laziness didn't stop us from asking questions. There are so many things close to being understood, but we often stop before we get there. To understand life, I needed to study death. So I started to watch how the human body broke down after death. I wanted to know why this happened and how it worked. Because of that, I spent many long days and nights in dark places, like tombs and buildings full of bones. I saw how the beautiful body of a person became weak and slowly disappeared, how death took the place of a face full of life and color, and how worms became the new owners of the amazing eyes and brain. I stopped and looked carefully at everything. I studied each small reason behind the change, from life to death, and from death to life again. Then, in the middle of all this darkness, a sudden light came to me. It was a light so bright and full of wonder that, when I saw what it showed me, I felt dizzy because it was so big and deep. After many days and nights of hard work, I finally discovered the reason behind life and how it begins. Even more, I learned how to give life to something that was not alive. At first, I was shocked by this discovery, but soon I felt great joy and excitement. This discovery was so big and powerful that I forgot all the small steps that led me there, and I could only see the final result. What the smartest people had been searching for since the beginning of the world was now something I could do. When I realized that such a powerful ability was in my hands, I waited a long time before deciding how to use it. Even though I had the power to give life, building a body to receive it, with all its complex parts like muscles, veins, and fibers, was still extremely difficult and required a lot of effort. With these thoughts, I started to create a human. It would have been too difficult to make the parts small, like in a normal human body, because that would require too much detail and effort. So, I decided to make the person very large, about 8 feet tall, around 2.5 meters, and with the whole body in proportion. After making this decision and spending a few months collecting and organizing my materials, I finally began. I thought that if I could give life to something that was not alive, maybe one day I could also bring someone back to life, even if they had already died and their body had started to break down. This idea gave me hope and helped me keep working without stopping. I studied for many hours, and because I stayed inside all the time, my face became pale and my body became very weak. While I worked, winter, spring, and summer passed. Before this project, I loved watching the flowers bloom and the trees grow leaves, but now I didn't even notice them. I was too focused on my work. Every night I had a light fever, and I felt very nervous and tired. Even the sound of a falling leaf scared me. I started to avoid other people, as if I had done something wrong. This was only the beginning of Victor Frankenstein's story. Really appreciate you watching and spending your time here with me. If you liked it, feel free to hit the like button, subscribe for more, and let me know what you think in the comments. See you in the next chapter.